Welcome back to another video in our Basics of Adalo series. Now, in the last couple of videos, we've looked at databases, we've looked at workflows, and we've even put together a UI and UX, as you can see in front of me. So if you're familiar with the 4 pillars of no-code, then you'll know the only pillar left to explore in Adalo is APIs and integrations. Now, we previously touched on Adalo's ability to use external databases, or as they call it, external collections, where you can connect to things like Airtable, etc. But what I want to show you this time is just a really basic demo of how you can actually make and receive an API request and response within Adalo. So although we kind of went with the theme of a to-do app previously, and I've still got that interface in front of me, I'm not going to worry too much about that for now. I'm going to just kind of throw a button in there, and I just want to show you at a really basic level how this works. So I'll move everything out of the way there, and I'll grab a button, and I'll put it in there. So what I want to do is I just want to show you me making an API call, and what I've done to set that up is I've went on Zapier. I've set up a webhook. The webhook is set up to receive, let me copy that URL. It's set up to receive a couple of parameters, such as a query string called tool and another key value pair called message. And then what it's simply going to do is go onto Airtable and put that data in here. So we should end up with something that says tool, and we should end up with something that says message. And the reason I've got tool in there is because we'll use this same demo across all of our kind of Basics of No Code series, just so you get an idea of how it works in comparison to other apps. So let's just call this button, we'll call it send data to Airtable, and we'll just end up giving it a little message and a little bit of text. So what you do is you go down to add action, and you go to custom action. Now I've already done it once to make sure it works, so I've already got one there, but I'm going to start afresh so that you can see what I'm talking about. So in any component you can do this. You can hit new custom action, and you've got to give that action a name, because just like that one from a couple of seconds ago that said Airtable data entry, you can have multiple. So we're going to give it a name, and we're going to call it, just call it Zapier. All right, send data to Zapier, because that's probably more accurate since I'm using Zapier as an intermediary. Now the first thing you're asked to do is decide whether that's creating, updating or deleting. We're just going to go with create because we're creating data, and then it's going to bring you to an interface that won't be familiar but will have some phrases you're used to hearing. So the base URL, well, I've got that, just I've copy and pasted it from Zapier, and that is just our API URL. If you remember back to our fundamental pillars of no code lesson, if you've seen that, when I worked with API requests, for example, when I looked at documentation, we had a base URL there that was present at the top of all kind of documentation. And again, if you look at any API and you're trying to find the API base URL, it will almost always be at the top of the documentation page. So we then got to pick a method. Again, most of these will be familiar. We've got post, get, put, patch, etc. I'm going to hit get, and then we've got the option to do headers and queries. And by queries, it does mean a query string parameter, so the typical key value pair or name value pair as Adalo's got here. Now, if you were doing a post, you can put some JSON in there, but you also have inputs if you're doing a post call as well. So you could add an item, text, number, date. Again, that will just pop up as a little key value pair. But because we're doing a GET request, everything goes in the query string. And if this is new to you, by the way, please check out my a lesson under the APIs and integrations pillar, where I demonstrated how to make an API request, and we did both GET and post request. So we've got 2 parameters, as I said, that need to go in here. We've got tool and we've got message. So I'll go tool, I'm going to say Adalo, and then I'll do another query parameter, which is we'll do message, and we will say the message is, and again, I've not just made that message one up, that's what I've kind of set up as my webhook, but we'll go message, and we will say this is my, I was going to say my first test, but it's not. This is my second test of sending an API request from Adalo. And I'm even going to include a little variable. No, I'm not. So we've got everything we need there. And then we'll just run the test request. In terms of why the variables weren't available there, by the way, I'll talk you through that in a wee second, but essentially what happens is when you send the test, all of the information that you get back as a response, so everything that Zapier comes back with, you will then get here in the form of magic text output properties. In other words, variables that you can now reuse. Now, Zapier doesn't give you a huge amount of information. It really just tells you it's successful and then gives you a bunch of random ID numbers that you will probably never use. But if we were to work with an API, for example, the Webflow API or the Facebook API or something like that, where real valuable information came back, then it's going to become available as various different variables that we can then use in our next action. Let me show you exactly what I mean. So if I was to then, if I was clicking this button, this action here is going to execute. I can then add another action. And let's say I want to create a new task. Again, this doesn't really fit what we're doing, but just to show you how this works, I can then use the magic text. And if you remember, my custom action was called send data to Zapier. Well, because this action would be running after the API request response is received, I can now access all the variables that are going to come back. Now, we don't know, we've only sent a test request. In reality, we don't know exactly what's going to come back. So we've only got a variable, but it just lets me use that data that came from the API. Obviously, Zapier only gave us these 4 elements, but I can go and use that, and that will allow me to essentially then take that, save it in Adalo, do something else with it, whatever I like. So let's check our Airtable and see if the data came through. And there it is. This is my second test of sending an API request from Adalo. So what's happened is I've sent a test there. If I was to go and preview and actually click that button, it's going to send a message again. Now in theory, there we go, click that. And there you go, it's through already. In theory, you could have some sort of user input that creates a variable and then lets you send that with a form. But I'm not going to worry too much about that at the minute, because you can see there's the data coming through. Whatever I put in that is going to come through again and again to Airtable. So that was really just a quick demonstration of how custom actions work in Adalo. You can use that for connecting with Zapier. You could use it to send email, to send things on Twilio, whatever you like. But it really is as simple as creating a custom action, putting the right data that you want in it, getting the right data out, and you're good to go from there. So thanks very much for watching, and let me know how you got on using custom actions on Adalo.